You may remember on the 13th of last month there was a speaker talking about East Anglian railway incidents, and I did ask if anybody had any ideas whether he was good or bad, and I had a mixed sort of answers. So I thought I'd tell you about one accident that was at Ilford Station that I happened to be involved in. It was the afternoon of the 16th of January 1944, just a few days before I left to go in the Navy, and a couple of the fellows, the young guys, I think 5 of us, agreed to meet at Ilford Station and go to one of the girls' houses to listen to records. In those days, we actually listened to records. We might have had a grope now and again, but mostly it was records. And so we agreed to meet at Ilford Station at, I think it was about 5 o'clock. Well, that particular evening was thick pea soup fog. And if you can remember the pea soupers we had years ago, they were really thick. I would imagine, from memory, the visibility was somewhere around 5 or 6 feet, if that. I got to the station, walked to the station from where I lived near Barking Bus Garage, in Longridge Road area, and I had to walk to Ilford Station, which took me about an hour and 10 minutes. And I got there were only 2 other pals at the station waiting for me. So the 3 of us stood there waiting for the other guys. I think the 2 of them were coming, when they didn't turn up. So at 6:30 on that evening, we were standing in the station foyer, or whatever you call it, and we heard a train come along, and we heard some crackers going off, which were the fog things that they put on the line, and we heard it stop in the station. Then about 5 minutes later or so, we heard another train coming, quite fast, and you know how the old steam train, boom, 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 boom. This came along, we heard it go through the crackers, the fog warnings, and then we heard this enormous crash. There was an enormous bang, crash, wallop, screeching, yelling, and the whole of the station, in Ilford Station, shook like mad. And of course, all the dust and soot and everything else that had been there in the station for donkey's years fell on us. There were two expresses involved. One was the express from Norwich, and one was the express from Yarmouth. And being wartime, of course, 1944, they were both packed solid with service personnel. Mostly American airmen from the East Anglian airfields, and the rest of them from Yarmouth, Navy, Royal Navy. The station booking hall was very, very dirty, very, very dense, and of course the fog was very dense also. But after the crash, the 3 of us rushed to the gate to go down the stairs to see what we could do. At which point the station ticket collector tried to stop us. You can't go down there, you haven't got any tickets. Well, we pushed him aside, grabbed some torches that were hooked on the fronts of bicycles that were parked there, and rushed down the steps. We couldn't see anything, as I said, there was no more than about 5 or 6 feet. But in the station and the platform, it was even thicker. So we jumped either down on the track or along the platform. There was an uncanny silence for a period of about 5 minutes before the screaming started. And then we could hear people screaming out, help me, where's my baby? I'm hurt, over here, over here. We didn't know where to go, and we couldn't see where to go. So I personally jumped down on the line, and I fell over all the debris that was around, and we started digging out people. The first one I got out was a wren, I suppose she was a young wren, about 20-ish, and in her nice blue wren's uniform with a white collar. But she was crying and screaming, I can't see, I can't see, I can't see. And I got hold of her and managed to get her up onto the platform. She had glass in both eyes, and both eyes were streaming blood, and her white colour was red. So I got rid of her, put her on the side where some of the nurses on the train were attending to them. We still couldn't see anything. So I looked around, or tried to look around and see where else I could help, and went back down on the rail, and we could hear this hissing of steam, the old steam engines, so we could hear the steam coming out all the time, but we couldn't see anything, so we didn't know what was happening. And I could hear one woman crying, where's my baby? Find my baby, where's my baby? So another couple of chaps and I went along trying to find the baby. We couldn't, we never did find the baby. We got this woman out, and then we went further along trying to get other people. And I do recall vividly, and unfortunately very vividly, one of the carriages was on its side, on the platform, half on the platform, half on the rail. And the people sitting in the seats were all still in the seats like this, rows of them, and as far as I could see, I thought they were all dead. None of them were moving. Then we found somebody else who was screaming, get me out, and there was a young man, it was in civilian clothes actually, one of the few, and we tried to get him out. There was a door right across his legs, and we went to get these railway doors, as you know, the old days are very heavy. So we tried to lift this door up. What we didn't know, it was half the carriage was attached to the door. So we couldn't get him out, we couldn't get the thing moving. Now remember, that happened at 6:20 p.m, according to the official description. And that was 6:20, and then we were trying to get whatever we could to move things. So somebody had kicked in the door on the platform, which was a store. We got out what we could, axes or pickaxes or anything that we could lever things with. And as I got those things out, or some of the things out, I went past the waiting room. So I looked in there to see if I could get anything there. And there were bodies laid out under a tarpaulin, and I only saw about 5 bodies at that time, but they weren't a pretty sight. That was at 6:20, as I said, and at 7:35, now remember that's an hour and 15 minutes afterwards, some civil defence workers, the ARP, arrived. They had got oxyacetylene lights, which they set up on the platform, which still didn't give us anything to see because they only had a range about a yard or so, and then of course we were blinded by the fog again. But that came at 7:30, and these gas lanterns were a help. We worked on for another, I don't know how long, time was not of the essence then, but we got as many people out as we could, dragged them to the platform, and passed them over to some first aiders. Another gang arrived from the civil defence, and also the police arrived. And then somebody said, well, we've got the police coming with the ambulances. And we wondered why the police were bringing ambulances, but what they were doing, the police had got the ambulances from Newbury Park, which was King George's Hospital, and they were leading the ambulances with paraffin torches, flaming torches, leading the ambulances by foot. So those ambulances arrived an hour and a half later from Newbury Park. As there were such many Americans on board, well, they were lucky that some of the Americans were medical. There was one doctor and several American nurses, as well as our own nurses. Being nearly all service personnel, they were fairly well disciplined. There was no panic, or at least not that I could see of. The screams were still going on, but they're more or less just muted screams. At 9:20, now that is 3 hours afterwards, they got the last passenger out. And I thought, from what I'd seen and what I'd been doing, I thought there must have been probably 100 dead. But in the official incident problem, or whatever they called it, official or report, actually said, and I looked up on the internet just recently, the actual figures were there were 7 killed and 9 killed, 38 seriously injured, and I imagine several hundred quite injured as well. Now, that's the sort of thing that once you see it, you'll never forget. And since I said I was going to talk on it, I've been thinking out. In fact, it woke me up in the night, 4 o'clock this morning, and I went over it in my mind. And it's something I will never forget. The fog started to clear. The oxyacetylene lamps and the torches that the police had to some extent dissipated the fog. And as it dissipated, we realised what had happened. Where I'd been down on the track, working and digging people out, and I could hear the steam, I had actually been underneath the engine, the steam engine, which had hit the back coach and then gone up through the roof of Ilford Station. And actually the front of the train was poking through the roof of the station. And I had been working underneath that, unknown, because I couldn't see anything. Had I seen it, I'd have been frightened to death. That was a very, very upsetting experience. Something that I think I will never forget. In fact, I don't think I ever saw anything in the Navy days to be as bad. But I think also, looking back on it, I feel sure that the figures have been massaged because of what I saw, particularly the carriage on its side with all the people still in the seats, motionless. I would have thought there would have been probably 50 to 100 killed. So it may well have been that with the severe censorship that we had in the war days, nothing was ever written up about it in the Ilford Recorder, nothing was written about it in the evening papers or the daily papers. There was a little 10-line article, which was the official report, which just barely reported a crash on the eastern line, the old LNER, and said 9 were killed. That was all. And I feel sure there were a lot more than that. The unfortunate part of it was, of course, that all of the casualties were service personnel, and they were all probably going up to London for the weekend or for that night because it was a Sunday. And to think that that happened whilst they were going out to have a good night was terrible. So that's my experience of a train crash. And when I got home, I left there, I don't know what time I left there, and walked back because the fog was clearing again, but there were still no buses running. When I got home in Chudley Crescent off South Park Drive, Ilford, my mother lived in one house, my grandmother and aunt lived in the house next door. They were all in my grandmother's house, all chatting as usual, which they did on a Saturday or Sunday night, the old usual family get-together. And as I walked in, all the conversation stopped. And they looked at me and said, "Good God, Ron, you look like you've seen a ghost." And I very nearly had. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ron. It's a very harrowing and disturbing experience, and it's obviously still with you today. Glad to show an appreciation for a moving speech by Ron. Thank you.